Hello and welcome back to Three Questions, the show where I ask someone I admire three questions about their career. My name is Jake Strong and I hope everyone has enjoyed their past week. Today we have one of the funniest magicians and stand-up comedians that I know, Harrison Greenbaum. Harrison has been featured on both America's Got Talent and Comedy Central. He is one of the hardest working comedians out there today and is a recipient of the Andy Kaufman Award for Originality in Comedy. Harrison's three answers give us an inside look into Tannen's Magic Camp and remind us why most magicians are terrible. Let's get right into it. All right, so first and foremost, I want to say thank you so much, Harrison, for being on this. This really means a lot to me.
Oh, my pleasure. Honestly, my pleasure.
So I don't know if you remember, but one of the first times that I actually met you, it was at Tannen's Magic Camp. I went to bed, normal night, and then I woke up mid-conversation with you because I had actually sleptwalked into a conversation that you were having.
Like in the lobby?
Late at night, yes. It was 2 a.m. It was absolutely terrifying for me because that was probably the most confused I've ever been because it was just one of those nights. And
Trust us, we were confused too. I think we were just talking in the lobby, and then some campers started drifting. And we're like, "Is he awake?" It was. Thankfully, you were okay.
Yes,
Yeah, that was a lot of thoughts about Marlo. A lot of unconscious thoughts about Marlo.
Yes, that was the first time anybody's ever seen me do that. So that was so confusing.
Thank God you sleep with clothes on. My God, thank God.
Yes. So kind of getting into Tannen's Magic Camp with the first question. So you've been very vocal about how Tannen's Magic Camp has been one of the best things for you as a young magician. So what are kind of the biggest takeaways from Magic Camp that has helped your career flourish over the years?
That you have to shower daily. I mean, a lot of kids go into that thinking they could skip a few days, and they're sorely mistaken. It really, I don't know what I would be or where I would be if Magic Camp didn't enter my life. The first year I went to Magic Camp, I was so homesick. Which is why I think I'm still assigned like the younger campers because they're the ones who are most likely to get homesick. And I think it means a lot for a counselor to come over and be like, "Don't worry, I was exactly in your shoes." I think the very first lesson I learned at Magic Camp was almost instantaneous because I was the only real magic kid in my area growing up. And so just like by default, I was the best magician that I knew because I was the only magician. So I had all the Easy to Master card magics on VHS and I was like, I'm a master magician. So I went to Magic Camp and I saw all of these incredibly talented kids, not to mention the incredibly talented counselors, and I had my ass kicked. And I was like, oh my God, I have so much farther to go. There's so much to do. That was really, really useful to have happen. So that was like almost immediate. I got on campus. You see all these kids who are like, they've already unpacked and they start practicing moves. And you're like, oh my God, I have no idea what any of these kids are doing. I need to learn immediately. So that was really great. And then just between all of the counselors, just being surrounded, I didn't really have any mentors until I got to camp. And then all of a sudden these counselors take you in and you're part of this Magic Camp family. And all of a sudden, all these professionals were, Frank Monaco was teaching me how to write a contract when I was like, 14 years old, 15 years old. I know comedians who are in their 30s who still don't know how to send out a contract. And I was sending out contracts. I was 14, doing somebody's bar mitzvah. I was barely older than the bar mitzvah boy. So even those kind of lessons. And then obviously the most important lesson, which is the thing that drives my work and my lecture, You Are All Terrible. It's all about originality and just seeing so many different magicians and all of them sort of, even like the Hiawatha Up workshop where we're talking about being original and pushing boundaries and thinking outside of the box. And that kind of stuff is just invaluable. And it's to the point now where like a lot of my best friends are to this day are still people that I met at Magic Camp. And, we'll when we see other acts, we almost immediately are like, man, I wish that person had gone to Magic Camp. They wouldn't have made any of those mistakes.
Yeah, and it's so crazy just to go there because of the wide array of ages and just levels of where everybody's at. It seems like everyone's on a different level, and for a lot of the kids, it's a lot of kind of their first time being out from their house for such a long amount of time. Like you said, some of them don't even know how to like shower and
Yeah.
get that all in. So yeah,
or we'll have a kid and we're like, hey, I'm not your dad, but you can't just eat pizza every single meal for a full week. It's just not, I know it sounds like a great idea, and like we can't force you to not do it, but like you need to have a salad.
Yes.
Just try a salad for God's sake.
And it's way too dangerous having the ice cream machine right.
Oh my God. You have a bunch of kids who've never been alone and you're like, oh yeah, there's infinite ice cream. Just putting it out there. Of course, that's all they're going to eat. There were some kids who I think subsisted on froyo alone.
Yeah, I don't think I got through 1 week where the ice cream machine made it to the end of the week. I think they all had to close that down and be like,
yeah, it's funny. There's been like a sort of a roller coaster of how the quality of the food. There was the first year we ever got to that new campus, because you only came to camp once we moved already to Bryn Mawr. So you know what it's like to go to camp with air conditioning. When I was a camper, we were on a campus where there was no air conditioning except in the theater. So classes, and this was August, so we're talking like 90 degrees, 100 degrees, and we're inside a classroom. So it was just it was a sticky, sweaty mess. Where was I going with this? Why was I talking about that?
We were talking about the food.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah. So that food was atrocious. And we would tell our counselors, man, this food sucks. And like, oh, you should have been at the previous campus. It was LaSalle, which is a military, I guess a military base installation. So they were eating like military food. So every counselor everybody will always say that their campus had worse food. But the first like couple of years we were at Bryn Mawr, I think they were trying to impress us or something. And they just like killed it every night, every day. And it was bad. We were like, no, usually we all like lose a couple of pounds at Magic Camp. Now we're eating too well.
Yeah, it's definitely, it's such a great just experience as in general. And
it's life-changing. It's impossible to explain until you go there. And like anytime I would date somebody, I would be like, you have to watch the Magic Camp documentary because it gives you a taste of this camp, and that camp is a defining thing in my life. And so if you want to understand who I am, you have to understand that place.
Yeah, and I saw that before I went to the camp. So
that's so wild. What was that like?
Yeah, so it was crazy because just kind of seeing everything, and I remember seeing Reed and Zoe after I had seen them because of how focused they were on them in the film, trying to go through the competition. So it was crazy to see them and kind of be like, holy crap, like they were here, and now that they're counselors and now they're teaching. So it was cool to see how it evolved from there.
And they filmed such a weird year. So that was the year I had graduated college. I had told everybody I'm going to be a professional comedian. That's what I'm going to do with my life. I'm sure a lot of counselors are like, but you have to be funny. What? I heard this later actually from a bunch of the counselors who were like, we were terrified when you announced that. We were like, oh no. And then between the year they filmed, which was that year, and then my first year out of college, I did more than 700 shows in the city. So I came back, way more experience than I had just even a year ago, and went back on stage. That was the first time I ever got a standing ovation at camp, which has obviously so much meaning because it's camp and it's all these people who've known me since I was a kid. And years later, a bunch of the counselors told me like that was a big moment for them too, because they were like, oh, he's going to make it. This is okay. This will be okay. He'll be okay. He's good now. There's a chance. But the year that they were recording, I just graduated from college. I decided I was going to be a full-time comedian. It's a terrifying position to be in. I had super long hair, tons of dreams and hopes. And I just remember being terrified, and there's this film crew running around, and I'm hosting all of the competitions trying to sneak jokes in. And there's a very like, you blink and you miss it, but you see me like rummaging through a notebook quickly because I'm like, how many jokes do I have left? Because I just started my career. Yeah. So it's a very interesting time capsule.
And that's a perfect lead into question two, because kind of chronologically, your stand-up comedy career started after you got into magic. So when you first started comedy, how did your prior knowledge of magic kind of help your first stand-up sets, and vice versa? When you started to learn more about comedy, how did that help improve your magic?
That's a fantastic question. So the good thing about having my magic background, my magic camp background, and then going into stand-up is there were certain basics that I didn't have to learn. So like I knew how to stand on stage. I knew how to hold a microphone. I knew sort of the basic stagecraft. I knew not to turn all the way around, like sort of the basics of just being on stage. I was also a theater kid. So I guess if you're a musical theater kid, a lot of that stuff is covered too. So I knew that stuff. I also had an idea of how the show business part worked. So I knew a little bit about that and the hustle that's required to get booked and stuff. But I remember very early in, I was barking for stage time. So I would stand on a street corner and I would just hand out flyers for 2 hours. It could be raining, it could be snowing. And I would just stand there. And it was great because you get rejected like thousands of times. And so you get this very thick skin. And that's before you even go on stage. So basically the trade was get rejected for 2 hours by people standing outside. And then you get to be rejected for 5 minutes by people sitting inside. So they give you like 5 minutes of stage time. And I remember they were like, oh, you're going to close it. And I was like, wow, I'm the headliner. And in reality, the show was such a late running show that like the final spot was at like 1 o'clock in the morning and most of the audience had already left. So it was absolutely not the headlining spot. So they give me 5 minutes at the end in exchange for all this work. And I'm getting ready to go on stage. And another comic sees me putting sponge balls in my back pocket, just shoving them in. And he goes, what are those? He used a curse word, but he's like, what are those? And I was like, it's a magic trick. If my jokes don't work, I'll use this as a closer. This way, I go out on a high note. And he's like, get those out of your pocket. He's like, you'll never learn. Like if you can't learn stand-up without a safety net, you need that fight or flight mechanism to kick in. You need to go on stage and know that if your jokes aren't funny and you're not funny, then you are going to bomb hard and it's going to be really painful. And that really kicks your ass very quickly. And it just makes you write more. It makes you, it does all it puts your brain into a different state because now it's like, it also makes the highs higher and the lows lower, which is important. Like the reason get stand-up comedy is so addicting is because yes, the lows are super low. So when the highs happen, it's that much more of an elation. So part of becoming a stand-up comedian was literally separating myself from magic entirely. There are still comics to this day who don't know I do magic. And my eventually, like, spoiler, later on, I ended up combining the two and touring a show that combines the two in a way that I think does justice to both of them. But yeah, it was a really important step, at least when I was starting out as a stand-up, to just do pure stand-up. And that's still something that I do. Like, I'm doing shows like very social distant rooftops and parks and stuff. And that's just stand-up. And being able to have that skill is really important. Because if you can entertain an audience with just jokes for an hour, then once you add the magic tricks in, as long as you do it in a way that is additive and not subtractive or not taking away from it, it's going to be even better. So there was a brief period where I just had coffee. So this is probably why I'm just rambling. Like I swear it's just espresso. It's 3 shots. Why did I ask for the extra shot? There was no reason for this.
I'm enjoying it, so don't worry.
Oh, okay, good. Thank you. But yeah, so I guess that was how. So magic gave me the basic tools that then allowed me to go on stage as a stand-up. And then once I was in stand-up, I always had this weird relationship with magic because I loved magic, and I knew magic itself is amazing, and some of the best. Like, I love magic, but there were magicians that were ruining it. Right? So and once I started doing stand-up, I realized that the stand-up comedians were following different rules. There's so many things that magicians do that if you put it in a comedian context would just sound bizarre, right? Like I was giving my lecture and somebody asked me, if you're a kid starting out, can you essentially, if you're a 14-year-old kid, can you do somebody else's act as sort of training wheels to learn how an act works? And I was like, that's such a weird question because no comedian would say, hey, is it okay if I do Chris Rock's routine for the first 2 years and then write my own stuff? It's not even allowed.
Yeah.
So it's the rules of the comic are you come up with an idea first. It's the rules of any artist. You come up with the idea first, then you figure out the technique, how you're going to say it, filter it through your voice. Magicians, because I guess they can go to a magic store, they really believe that they can just kind of buy a trick or material and then figure out a way to sort of customize it, jam it into their act. And that's just not how art is made. So being in the comedy world and realizing that the way art starts is with a blank page or a blank computer screen, and then you create stuff that only you are able to do. That really then, once I went back to magic, so changed my perspective and how I create.
Yeah, and I don't think enough people know how different stand-up comedy and magic are, because to the public, they're like, oh, you're on stage. In magic, sometimes you make people laugh. But I know that last year, I went up for a 5-minute set, and it was one of the most terrified I've ever been, because it was my first time ever. My whole family was there. And
Oh, God. No, number one rule of starting out a comedy, family not allowed for like a year.
I did that for magic. My first restaurant gig, I said, family, I'm sorry, you cannot be here. I need to kind of do this on my own. It was like a little showcase. I had 5 minutes, and I was one of the most nervous I've ever been going up on stage. And people were like, oh, like, well, you've been up on stage like hundreds of times. Why is it so nerve-wracking? I said, well, stand-up comedy is so much different because you have nothing to fall back on.
Yeah, there's no net. If you're a magician, even if things are going wrong, you're like, all right, I'm shooting fire out of this thing. They're going to be impressed.
Yeah.
Either your joke works or it doesn't, and it's up to them. Like that's the thing is, the instrument. Another comedian said this, but the instrument of a comedian is the audience. So in magic, you have other instruments, like your cards are technically the instrument, but like, or whatever you're using. But the audience is the only instrument you've got when you're a stand-up. You're trying to get noise out of them. And so, it's a scary thing if your guitar is made up of other people who get to decide whether they're going to be played or not.
Yeah. It was absolutely terrifying. And kind of getting into the last question, you brought this up.
Was it like a little bit fun? Was it invigorating?
Yes.
Did you get a laugh? I'm sure you got at least one laugh.
I did get a laugh. Yes.
How good did that feel, though?
Yes, it feels the best when it was something that 100% I wrote all myself, and then I went up there and did that. That's the best feeling. And
it's like heroin. I've never done heroin, but I imagine the fact that people do so much heroin that it's got to be good. Like, it's got to feel great. Otherwise, why would you do heroin?
Yeah.
So I assume then that that heroin's got to feel at least as good as when a joke works. Yes. So I've never done heroin, but I assume that's how it feels.
Yeah, and just feeling the wave the first time, because in a comedy club, well, of course, it's going to be different now, but everybody's so close, and everybody's right there, and just feeling the wave of the laugh the first time.
And then when you start to string them together, and you're doing like longer sets, and it's just laugh, and you feel like a laugh conductor, and you're like in an orchestra, and you're like, oh my God, I just point and there's laugh, and I point and it's honestly an unexplainable feeling, even just like physically, because you can't understand what laughter sounds like until you're standing in this center position with all these laughs being like thrown at your face. Very few people get to experience, unless you stood behind me in my set, you would never know that feeling. And it's amazing. It's amazing.
Yeah. And my second time going up was scheduled for March 18th. So,
no.
Yes, I haven't gotten there, but I've been writing. So hopefully when everything opens
up. So this
up.
whole pandemic was just to prevent you from going on stage ever again. Is that what I'm hearing? That this is all a massive conspiracy to prevent Jake Strong from ever doing those jokes again? Somebody said, wait, he's getting back on stage? Quick, cue the virus.
Yes.
Shut it down. Shut it all down. We can't take any risks.
Yeah. Don't just stop at the comedy club. Shut everything.
What if he performs in a backyard? Screw it. Nothing. I don't want any kind of gatherings of any kind for any reason.
Yes. So hopefully I'll be able to get on stage and won't shut down the world this time. That's the goal. So kind of
the second time you get on stage, you're like, okay, I'm doing my third one. Then a meteor strikes. You're like, all right, Jake. I appreciate your stand-up dreams, but it's affecting the world.
Yes. I'll stick to magic. I promise. I might put a few jokes, but I'll stick to it. And kind of something that we talked about this whole time, your lecture, You Are All Terrible, talks a lot about a lot of the things that magicians do wrong.
Yes.
So my question to you is, if you got all the magicians in a room, and hypothetically, you were appointed the kind of magic czar for the day, and you were in charge of everybody, and you were given full control about how magicians create and perform their magic, what is the first thing that a lot of magicians do wrong in their approach to magic that you would entirely outrule?
Well, the first thing I would do is I would tell them, don't stop being creepy to women. There'd be more women in magic if you weren't also fucking creepy. They're your equals and your colleagues, and you need to treat them with respect. and we'll have more women in magic if women feel comfortable to be in magic. So stop it. And then the second thing I would say is don't touch kids. I don't know why there's a bunch. Stop it. I say this in my lecture, but I was headlining Monday Night Magic, and I was setting up my stuff. And one of the ushers came in and told me that another person that worked there had been arrested. And I was like, oh my God, how many kids? And they were like, no, he was arrested for robbing a bank. And I was relieved.
Yeah.
Should never feel relieved about that. So I would get all of that out of the way. And then once I've gotten that out of the way, I basically, it's okay to be a cover band. You just need to know that you're a cover band. And if you're doing material that you didn't write, based on performances you saw other people do with tricks that you bought, you're a cover band. That's not art. Real art starts with an idea. You come up with an original idea. You always start with the idea, and then you figure out how to do it. So you sit down at a blank piece of paper or a computer screen, and you just dream up a show. And you go, okay, it would be really cool if I fly out over the audience and I start throwing sausages upon the crowd below. That would be a dumb idea, but it would be an idea. It would still be better than linking rings. I'll say that. Why do we do that trick? Nobody owns giant rings. Who owns giant metal rings except for magicians and like somebody who's making like a cheap Olympic ring sign somewhere? I don't know. But why are we, if you were a wizard, if somebody granted you wizard powers and you were legitimately like Doctor Strange or something, and you're like, I know exactly what I'm going to use my powers for. I'm going to buy these rings and link them and then unlink them. They would take your powers away. They'd be like, this is not why we gave you the powers. Can you like fly or like make money up here or something? You weirdo, just linking to sad classical music? No. Anyway, sorry. Sometimes if you get me on a tangent about linking rings, I will just go off. No, but the creative process. And then the other, I guess one of the things that I've said before is that the art that you then create should have some kind of point. It should be worth the time you've spent to create it and worth the time the audience spends enjoying it or seeing it performed. And the rhyming way to figure out if it has a point is it true? Is it new? Is it you? So all the material you do should be true to the world. It should be new. It should be something nobody else has offered. And it should be you. It should be something that only you can offer. And if you can truly offer art that meets that rubric, that would make magic so much better. And we'd have so much more original magic. It wouldn't just be, that handful of people. Like all the magic heroes in our world, all the people that I think everybody looks up to, Copperfield, Penn and Teller, Matt King, Lance Burton, all those guys did the actual work. They did the artistic, create an idea, then come up with a method and make sure it's filtered through your voice. So the reason they're your heroes is because of that method. And so there's no reason you can't be somebody else's magic hero in the future.
That's great advice, because so many little magicians do what is so easy to the stand-up comedy community and what's kind of been ingrained within the stand-up comedy community. So I'm very, very glad that that you're out there trying to kind of help that and reverse that for the magic community.
I appreciate it. I don't know how this became my brand, but it all started with I was just joking, and I thought it would be so funny to start a lecture with a slide that just says, "You are all terrible." So I was so fed up of seeing the same 3 tricks over and over again with no difference. Everybody's doing the same routines over and over again. Yeah. And so it's like, I'm going to start a lecture that says you are all terrible. And the original conception of it was just going to start with like a picture of linking rings, and then it would just have no. And it would be like parasols, no. And it's been funny for it to evolve into what it is. And I love magic so much. And so I want magicians to live up to the promise that magic has.
Yeah, I thoroughly agree with that, and that's what I've been trying to do, trying to inject myself within everything wherever I can. And but before we go, Harrison, is there anything that you have to plug that kind of you're doing within the next few months, even while we're inside?
Sure. My website is harrisongreenbaum.com. It has a schedule. The schedule is now a mix of different kind of live streams and Zooms. Some of them are public, so you can definitely grab a ticket to anything that interests you. At Harrison Comedy is my Twitter and Instagram, and my weekly live stream interview series, Who Books That?, which is sponsored by the International Brotherhood of Magicians. Who Books That with Harrison Greenbaum. You can get it on Apple Music. It's a podcast. But also you can get it at whobookstat.com. There's 34 episodes. They're all really, really fun. It definitely kept me sane during this pandemic. But yeah, whobookstat.com. I think it's a great resource. They're some of the best magicians in the world, and they have really, really great advice.
Awesome.
Well, and funny stories.
Yes, a lot. Yeah, well, Harrison, thank you so very much for doing this. This really means a lot to me. Thank you.
My pleasure. Anytime, man. Anytime. What's on your shirt?
What's on my shirt? Oh, it says 70s and 80s. This was a thing we did in high school. It was a competition night where half the school was 70s, half the school was 80s. We went against.
Oh, nice. It makes me feel old because I was born in the 80s.
Yeah.
That's insane. Now it's like a fun, kitschy color war theme.
Yes. Yeah. Blue and white. Yes, exactly.
Oh boy. Yeah. No, I was technically. I mean, I was late '80s, so I really was a '90s kid.
Oh yeah. You can count as the '90s. I will give you.
Which is coming back somehow. I never thought I'd live in a world where fanny packs are cool again.
Yes, I've been seeing those a lot. On college campus, those are everywhere. I will tell you that. Yeah.
I hope that I don't know if this part ends up in the episode or not, but I do love the idea that it's like very intense talk about the creative process and then just ends on fanny packs.
That's the perfect sign off. I think we're good. Yes. This is how we're going to end every single episode now. We're going to have to end it with a talk about fanny packs. And
that's right. Or just name one thing from when you were a kid that you're surprised is cool again. I'm just glad baggy jeans are out. In high school, your jeans had to be so baggy they were like a hindrance to movement.
I haven't seen baggy jeans, so
Google Jenko jeans, G-N-C-O. I had a pair of them. They are atrocious.
I bet. Well, thank you so very much, Harrison. I hope to bump into you in person soon.
I have many opinions on magic and jeans.
Yes. Again, a huge thank you to Harrison Greenbaum for talking with me and constantly reminding me of how funny he is. Harrison has always been a personal hero of mine, and having him on this podcast honestly meant everything to me. If you want to check him out, go to Harrison Comedy on any social media platform or go to www.harrisoncomedy.com. You can also check out his interview show, Who Books That, sponsored by the IBM with some of the world's top pros. Thank you all for tuning in, and if you want to help out this podcast, like I say every single week, please leave a review and share it with someone who would enjoy it as well. If you have any questions or want to make a donation to help the podcast, email jake@jakestrongmagic.com. This is currently a very small project that I've been working on, but I would love to see it grow and reach as many people as possible. Thanks again, everyone. Stay safe, and I'll see you next week.